Rise and shine! Can you pass the milk for this cereal? How about eggs and bacon? Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It might come to surprise you that that statement alone, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, was actually propaganda. The modern era of breakfast begins with cereal. Before its invention, breakfast wasn't standard or routine. In fact, in medieval Europe, breakfast was seen as a luxurious meal reserved for the upper echelons of society, not for the rest of us peasants. And if we look at history, take the Romans for example, well, they believed it was actually better to eat one meal a day, often later in the evening. The Native Americans, however, grazed throughout the day eating small meals. And while many American colonialists technically ate breakfast, they usually did so hours after work and not first thing in the morning as many of us do today. Many historians agree that breakfast became a daily thing during the Industrial Revolution once workers moved to cities and became employees who worked and had set schedules. Yet it might come to surprise you that they weren't eating the meals we think of when breakfast is mentioned. Instead, Americans were eating steaks, potatoes, roast chickens, and pies. And because of that, many were complaining of indigestion. And this became a massive public debate all over newspapers and magazines with headlines asking what the solution was. Americans needed a simpler, lighter breakfast. And that's how cereal was invented. The fight for breakfast is a vicious one, and as you can imagine, this success of the cereal industry has made them so powerful, practically giving them a monopoly over breakfast. Today, cereal has grown into a massive industry, and just to put things in perspective, in 2022, the market size of cereal production amounted to a whopping $11.7 billion. That's in the US alone, and this was all thanks to clever marketing. Before cereal consisted mainly of sugar, was overprocessed, high fructose corn syrup, and all that other bad stuff, Americans viewed cereal as a healthy food. But why? It started with Dr. James Caleb Jackson, who was determined to find the solution to the indigestion epidemic. In 1863, he came up with granula, which was basically graham crackers that had to be soaked in milk for about 20 minutes before eating. Not really a ready-to-eat cereal, and let's face it, quite underwhelming. It was available for visitors in his sanitarium in Dansville, New York. Fast forward a little bit, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, who was visiting the sanitarium, came across granula and decided to start his own, and by 1980s, cornflakes were invented. Eventually, Dr. Kellogg felt understandably bitter that the two most successful cereal entrepreneurs were his brother, Will Keith Kellogg, who won the rights to use the Kellogg name, as well as his former patient, Charles Post, who in 1897 started Grape-Nuts. Dr. Kellogg accused Post of stealing the cornflake recipe from his safe. Yes, there was a lot of drama involving cereal at that time. So, then how did cereal become so mainstream? Will Keith Kellogg and Charles Post began heavily investing in advertising. These early advertisements focused on convincing the public that cereal was the solution to America's indigestion problem, that it was a healthy alternative and could increase your capacity to work. By the 1940s, vitamins would be added to fortify cereal along with sugar to make the medicine go down easier. And in 1944, the clever marketing campaign for Grape-Nuts would be unleashed. Radio ads would mention, nutrition experts say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. This marketing phrase became embedded into our minds. To appeal to children, cereal companies pioneered the use of cartoon mascots. As early as 1930s, characters like Tony the Tiger, Frosted Flakes, and Snap, Crackle, and Pop, Rice Krispies, first appeared. Advertising was the key to the cereal business. Whether they involved cartoon characters or wacky health claims, the important thing was to establish a brand for each cereal. Cereal and breakfast foods don't have a monopoly on animated mascots and these fake health claims, but there are a number of reasons why the battle over breakfast is particularly ferocious. The first is that any company that persuades you to eat its cereal, Pop-Tarts, or bagels absolutely owns your breakfast. This is linked to consumer psychology since most people eat almost always the same breakfast every day. Our breakfast choices are likely habitual because of the strength of our morning routines. Ads by the chicken lobby, however, may convince people to eat a bit more chicken, but an avalanche of Tony the Tiger ads can get tens of thousands of children to eat Frosted Flakes every morning for years. And while some Americans cook breakfast, people's desire for fast, convenient meals mean that many breakfast foods are packaged products that rely on advertising. Let's face it, cereal is extremely easy and inexpensive to make, a fact that angered Dr. Kellogg, who patented his creation but failed to prevent others from copying it. Yet just a few companies dominate the market today. The final reason why the marketing battle over breakfast is so fierce is that corporations have for decades seen it as the meal that offers the most opportunity to wring out more food spending from consumers. Why have fast food chains focused more on advertising Egg McMuffins, White Castle Belgian waffles, and Taco Bell breakfast burritos? Well, throughout the fast food world, lunch and dinner sales have been flat for years, while breakfast sales have climbed steadily. You can find the same logic in cereal makers' 1944 marketing strategy, where the phrase "breakfast is the most important meal of the day" was coined. The question is, did the marketers and executives of these brands genuinely believe the value of promoting a cereal for breakfast is healthy? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. Nutritionists have debated back and forth for decades whether America's increasingly desk-bound workforce needed a hearty breakfast. This debate has never stopped. By the time of the 1944 campaign during World War II, government nutritionists had signed with the pro-breakfast camp. In the interest of improving the health of army recruits, they teamed up with cereal companies to suggest that everyone eat a good breakfast of whole grain cereal and fruit. But it wasn't just the cereal industry that funded these studies, utilizing clever marketing tactics and pouring millions into advertising. Another group would hire their own marketing guru to get their foot onto our breakfast table. The Beech-Nut Packaging Company wanted to sell more bacon, and so they hired the king of propaganda and public relation, Edward Barneys, who was, get this, the nephew of the founding father of psychoanalysis, none other than Sigmund Freud. And it comes as no surprise that he would use his uncle's work on the psychology of the subconscious to change people's minds. In the 1920s, Americans typically ate a light breakfast like cereal, and in order to increase bacon sales, Barneys wrote to 5,000 physicians asking whether a heavy breakfast was better for health than a light breakfast. 4,500 physicians wrote back confirming that a heavy breakfast was better for health as the body is depleted of nutrients after a night's sleep, although the doctors never mentioned bacon specifically. He had this study published in newspapers across America, conveniently presenting bacon and eggs as the ideal breakfast choice. Edward Barneys was an interesting character. Some would call him a genius in marketing. Others had much less flattering opinions of him. But you have to hand it to him, he had the power to influence people. His first marketing efforts were in politics. He'd help American President Woodrow Wilson market World War I as an effort to bring democracy to Europe. He'd also help Calvin Coolidge appear less stiff and grim in his campaign for the presidency. Barneys would apply what he learned in politics to market companies. This is where he differed from everything that was seen previously. He didn't market a product, he'd seek to change the ideas of the consumer who purchased the product. Here's a scary excerpt from the 1928 book Propaganda by none other than Edward Barneys. In almost every act of our daily lives, whether in the sphere of politics or business, in our social conduct or our ethical thinking, we are dominated by the relatively small number of persons who understand the mental processes and social patterns of the masses. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind. Indeed, our entire lives are filled with marketing. Sometimes without careful exploration, it can be difficult to figure out what is real and what is the magic of a marketing department. Barneys believed that all societies were bound to be manipulated, and it was better for good agents to do it as opposed to evil ones. That's a pretty skeptical view of humanity and marketing in general. Now, is breakfast truly the most important meal of the day? Well, nutritionists are less certain about the value of this advice today. Those studying this issue say that studies that supported the importance of breakfast for weight management have been contracted by more rigorous examinations, and that studies that examine the importance of school children eating breakfast have failed to show that breakfast helps them focus on their work. But you won't hear that from marketers. Breakfast is the most skipped meal in America. It's always a good idea to remain skeptical of the claims made in advertisements and the ideas expressed by organizations with vested interests. But with breakfast food, skepticism is particularly necessary. Since advertising is the foundation of the entire ready-to-eat industry, the incentives for deception are strong. Breakfast is the most marketed meal of the day. As Barneys said, any activity could be used for positive or negative purposes. We must be careful in our marketing activities not to become manipulators, as opposed to showing the best face of the organizations and the products we sell. A little ironic coming from him. You see, there's a fine line between the advertisers and polluters of the public mind. We must also carefully examine those who market themselves or their products to us as well. Hopefully, you'll be reminded of this video every time someone mentions to you that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel for more, give us a thumbs up, and let us know if you're team breakfast or not in the comments below. Thanks for watching.